let's. Are we starting? Okay, sorry.
I started recording just in case you want to call the meeting to order.
All right, well, it is currently 6:32. We have a quorum. Today is Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. This is our first meeting of 2021 of the Citizen Police Review Commission. I would like to call this meeting to order.
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Just have to unmute so you can say aye.
I can do roll call. Jamal Graham. Okay. Blanca Lule.
Here.
Rick Marsh.
Yes.
Shana. She wasn't going to be here. Nico Ross.
Here.
Junitha Shambi.
Here.
And please correct me if I pronounce her name incorrectly.
Nika. I'll help you out.
Okay, thank you.
I knew
Nika
that would be mine.
Strickland.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Clarence Weaver. Okay, Douglas Whitmore. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Paulina, for that. Okay, so I would like to know if we can have someone, do we need to continue to read in the okay, so if I can have someone read in the executive order by the governor. Any volunteers? It's just at the top of the agenda.
It's in the agenda?
Yes, it's right at the top.
Okay, I can read it.
Okay.
As
Thank you,
the
Monica.
result of an executive order issued by Governor J.B. Pritzker suspending in-person attendance requirements for public meetings, City Council members and city staff will be participating in this meeting remotely. Due to public health concerns, residents may provide public comment virtually at the meeting or in writing.
Thank you, Blanca. Before
Someone just needs to suspend the rules, and that's pretty much it.
do I need to have them move to do that?
Someone has to move to suspend the rules, and someone has to second. Yes.
I moved to
Okay.
suspend the rules.
We have a second?
Second.
I second.
Okay,
Right.
all in agreement, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition, rules will be suspended for this meeting. Moving along on the agenda two, item 2A, the approval of the December 2nd, 2020 meeting minutes. If I can have a motion to approve the December 2nd, 2020 meeting.
I move to approve the December 2nd, 2020 meeting minutes.
May I have a second?
I second.
All in agreement, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Having no opposition, the December 2nd, 2020 meeting minutes will be approved. Okay. Do we have any public, we're gonna move on to agenda item 3 for public comments. Do we have any guests this evening? Any public comment? Having no public comment, we'll continue down the agenda item. We have our items for consideration tonight. Our first item is 4A, which is the review of complaint register 20-01. If we can have a motion to begin discussion on complaint register 20-01.
I move to begin discussion on CR 20-01.
Okay, can I have a second?
I second.
Second.
Any, all in agreement, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition, let's begin our discussion on CR 20-01. I'll send it over to you, Sergeant Warnick.
Thanks. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
Here.
Good. Happy New Year. You guys might remember this is from October. You guys initially reviewed this one and asked that it go back for re-review. This is the traffic stop over at Asbury and Lee. It was the one where a female passenger was asked to exit the vehicle and had asked for a supervisor, and the supervisor was not called by the officer. There were some concerns that were raised, so it was sent back. A sergeant did review, did a second review of the case. Deputy chief picked the sergeant based on his experience. The sergeant is pretty well versed in the law. I would have to say he's one of the smartest people in this building. So he went through it. It's pretty lengthy. If you've read through the summary, I'm sure you guys read the memo as well. What ultimately came out of this was perhaps we should revisit our policy on calling for a supervisor, make sure that that is clear cut so that officers know that, as well as just given, the policing, the day and age we live in, that just because you can't ask somebody out of a car doesn't mean that you should be able to articulate it more than just because I can. And that's ultimately what the sergeant found. He did not find any further rule violations, but I think, he did a thorough job. I did get him copies of the audio. Kimberly provided that for me from the meeting. So he listened to everything that was said during the meeting. He saw that he basically reviewed the whole packet again, as well as everything you guys had said and your concerns. I didn't want to paraphrase anything that the commission had brought up. So I asked him to actually listen to it so he could have an unbiased. I didn't want to give him any reason to think one way or the other. So I'll leave it up to you guys.
The disconnect that I had was, okay, the tinted windows. That seems to be pretty prevalent in how we stop people with tinted windows. All right, so I guess I kind of get that. But then the comment about, K9 unit can come in, with a sniff test. So from tinted windows to now K9 coming in, I don't remember reading about the K9 comment initially when we read this a couple of months ago. So I don't know. I just think that.
Well, it was in there, and it was in the video as well. The K9. So here's the thing with the K9: you can do a sniff around a vehicle. You can't extend the stop though. You can't wait 20 minutes for a dog to come to the stop to do the sniff. He ended up getting flustered and didn't do the sniff. And it turned out the K9 was his backup. So he was within his legal rights to do a sniff. However, he ended up not doing it. I don't think, based on what we saw, there was anything in there other than the tinted windows for that.
What would have been his legal rights? Because he suspected something? That would have made it legal?
You can bring a dog around the car. You can. It's a sniff test. It's not an invasion. He's not going into the car. So you're legally allowed to do that. The question that the sergeant raised was, should we be operating like that? right? So just because we can, should we? I think that's where we're at in policing, and where we're at in America today is we should just ask ourselves as officers, just because I can, should I? You know? So I think that ultimately that's the biggest thing I took from this in reading his review was, everything was done legally, right? He was allowed to ask for the sniff. He's allowed to do that. But just because you can, you shouldn't necessarily. You shouldn't ask a mom and her daughter out of the car necessarily, right? So that's what I think this is leading to.
What would be the next step? So the conclusion here is that these policies may need to be revisited, and that calling for a supervisor, should be something that if requested, it should be done immediately. But what's the next step of actually putting that into place or going through the process of getting that policy changed? Because just writing it in this report as, these would be good ideas doesn't seem to.
So now from you, it goes to the chief of police. So once the commission approves it, we'll send it to the chief, and we will talk to him about having something actually implemented. That's the next step. And, based on the fact you all provide a report, the chief takes a look at that with the case too, before it's going to HSC. So as long as that information is in there, he'll review it, and we'll present it. Commander Gu and I, when we meet with him, we'll present that to him as well.
Hey, Aaron, can I jump in here real
Yes.
quick to, kind of touching on some highlights of what Sergeant Warnick already talked about. I'm going to talk about the sergeant who reviewed this. He does have a law degree. And I think that kind of hitting on Sergeant Warnick's point of like, you can, as a police officer, you can cite case law, and what you're legally allowed to do may not be what's wise to do. And I think that this officer leaned too heavily on, this is what the law allows me to do, and was short on articulation as to why it was wise and prudent. And I think that that's what the sergeant that reviewed it again, those were the fair points that he made. It's like, well, there's more to articulation than citing case law. There is articulating why it's prudent and why it's applicable. So while it may not be necessarily a violation of somebody's rights or policy, is it achieving the goal? Is it wise? And we have many concurrent goals we try to achieve as law enforcement: good community relations, investigate crime, deter crime. How is what you're doing kind of hitting, touching all the bases? To answer the question about notifying a supervisor, this is I guess we could call whatever where the policy falls short. All our officers have been told, at least verbally, throughout their entire career, if somebody asks for a supervisor, you call one. Within our policy, it says if basically it's kind of binding, where if it's known and you're advised and you've been told throughout your entire career, you're supposed to call a boss. And if you don't, that's a technical violation of the policy. Now, to strengthen that policy, we will look going forward, and I envision some adjustments to our Lexapol suite of policies being made to make that more of a concrete, to solidify it in written policy, and therefore if somebody violates it, make discipline and corrective action more efficient and more binding.
So I can appreciate the fact that there was a second review of this, and that they understood that not only like there were questionable things that were done, but maybe this is a department-wide policy change that needs to be implemented. I can appreciate the question that Rick brought up as well. I deal with that area of law fairly often as well in my line of work. It's just the way, and I don't mean to speak for Rick at all. It's just the words that were said by this officer that's when flags start to go up for us, And I understand that there are some laws that facially they may not seem biased, but when applied, they are. So, or policies in that same sense. So I can appreciate that when this was given a second glance, you know, they may not have seen that any policy or any law was actually violated, but maybe the laws and policy that are in place right now might need a second look at, because they themselves might need some tweaking or changing, because it gives the officers too much discretion on how it is that they do their job, and it allows them to apply law. It gives them too wide of a range to apply law, and so no one can actually pinpoint like, okay, well, this is wrong. Well, actually, no, it's not really wrong, you know. And so I appreciate the fact that there was a second look, and that there, you know, that they did see like, well, maybe there needs to be a department-wide policy change, and that will be something that is looked at, I'm hoping, in the very, very, very immediate near future, so that incidents like this one can be prevented. And it's, you know, being with the stop, being with the free air sniff, being with the call of the K9 unit, although I understood that was their backup, even being with the call of the supervisor. Because we remember, police officers, they're trained, so they're held to a higher standard of, you know, whereas the everyday citizens don't know these things. And so all they know is to do, like if you go into a department store, I'm gonna ask for a manager. I wanna know that someone that's even more highly trained than you is telling me the correct information, and that you're not just giving me information all willy-nilly. So I can appreciate that they are looking to implement those changes.
I will say this, there is no downside to having a supervisor respond during a stop. You know, we tell the officers, if you have something or that's actionable, we don't expect your investigation to stop. We expect you to act prudently. But that supervisor coming is only going to be an asset to everybody there, and an extra layer of communication, and in some instances, a cooler third party. So I'll be honest, I think that this is a pretty clear cut. I think this is a pretty clear cut violation, but we're going to strengthen it in policy.
Good.
Any further discussion? Having no further discussion, if I can have someone, if we want a motion to move this on to HSC.
I motion and move that we use CR number 2001 to human services.
I can have a second.
I
Okay.
second that motion.
All right. All in agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition, we will move CR 20-01 to HSC. All right, let's move on. If I can have a motion to discuss Department Inquiry 20-11.
I move to discuss DI 20-11.
I can have a second.
All right. So
I see Blanca is trying to,
Yeah, I'll second that.
I was waiting on it.
all that agree, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, having no opposition, we will begin our discussion on Department Inquiry 20-11. We'll give it over to you, Sergeant Warnick.
Thank you. So this came into our office in August. It occurred in June. So it was essentially a neighbor dispute. It was an ongoing neighbor dispute. The neighbor was pretty abusive, calling derogatory and racist names to the neighbor, harassing them. So on this particular incident, they called 911. The officer went over there. During the incident, there was obviously people were escalated. There was, or elevated. There was, back and forth. The officer who responded, it was determined by the patrol sergeant that he did demonstrate patience. He tried to de-escalate or use de-escalation tactics, and was professional in dealing with parties, which were both uncooperative at the time. And again, I think that the caller probably was due to the fact of what they endured. It went through the chain, and the officer was exonerated, and the deputy chief agreed there was no further action involved on the officer's part as far as any violations go.
Do we have any discussion based on that?
Didn't have any issues. I thought the officer handled it, professionally and with patience. I was good with it.
I agree with you. I have nothing to say on this. I think that it was handled, I see nothing where it was handled in an unprofessional manner. So,
I agree as well.
all right, having no discussion. If I can have someone move this to HSC.
We move it to Human Services.
Second.
I second that motion.
All agree to move Department Inquiry 20-11 to HSC, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition, we will move Department Inquiry 20-11 to HSC. Let's move forward on to DI, sorry about that, DI 20-13. If I can have a motion to begin discussion.
I
I
motion we
motion.
begin discussion on DL 2013.
Okay, can
Sorry.
I have a second?
Second.
All agree, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition, I say we open this up to the floor. Give it to you, Sergeant Warnick.
Thank you. So this was a traffic crash that occurred in June. The complainant called in August, and essentially it was a one-car crash. It was at the bend on Sheridan going north past the university, past Central Street. And the vehicle ended up striking the guardrail, was inoperable. The citizen was in the area, felt that based on the race of the occupants, that they were treated differently than they would have been if they were Black. I believe it was one or two white and one Hispanic male in the car.
But the driver was white though, right?
I believe he was. I think the backseat passenger was Hispanic. So his complaint was that it was not handled appropriately, that the officer did not conduct field sobriety tests, and that essentially they allowed them to go because they were white. This case was reviewed. As far as the rule violations, the patrol sergeant unfounded it. The patrol sergeant did note, though, that based on the experience. So essentially, this came down to traffic enforcement, and it was a newer officer. And based on her experience, there's some other things she could have done differently that maybe a more experienced officer would have done to mediate and mitigate this. So essentially, she was given just a shift level counseling through the chain and went all the way up, and then some training courses, which will be through NEMR when they're available, Illinois Traffic Crash for Patrol and Law Enforcement Use of Force review. So as far as that goes, it's just a shift level and training. And again, I think it all comes down to experience on this one with the officer. She's fairly new. I don't think she violated anything. And I think it's tough to say what would happen if somebody else was there. So, and I don't know that the race of the officer was taken into account by the complainant as well.
Okay, I do want to discuss this.
Yes.
I had a problem with this one. I'm reading in this, the incident per the patrol sergeant states, the passengers of the vehicle indicated they all occupants of the vehicle consumed a couple of beers, including the driver. That was literally told to them. It didn't say when, but they all admitted that they consumed alcohol. I don't know how old these young men were. Had that been any other person, I'm just gonna say, there would have been at least 5 different tickets written. At least. There's a DUI, there's a failure to reduce a crash, there's property damage to city property. There is, they probably would have had a transportation of alcohol. There's so many that would have been, so not one citation was written. The only reason that AAA wasn't brought in as requested by the mother of the driver was because the city said, oh no, we have to clear this from the street and this is blocking traffic. So we're gonna remove this vehicle. Otherwise, if we could have moved it off to the side, then yes, we would have let you taking care of this privately. Please go ahead and take your son home.
Yeah, he was released to his daddy.
However, and there's no repercussions to you, but yet the citizens of Evanston will pick up the tab for the property damage. And even though you admitted to drinking, we're gonna allow you to go. I don't need to have training as a police officer to know that there's something more that needs to be done there. I don't care how new I am. I don't. So I tend to agree with this complainant in this complaint that yes, had that been a Black or brown driver, this situation would have turned out completely different. And I don't know how anyone else reviewing this would not have seen that same thing.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that Janitha said. In addition to that, the finding that there was no rule violations. I'm looking at Rule 4, failure to perform a duty. The officer did not conduct a field sobriety test when the occupants admitted that all of them had consumed alcohol. Like that seems like a failure to perform a duty.
There's no breathalyzer, nothing.
Nothing was done.
I just don't see how she failed and whoever reviewed this failed as well. And yes, the complainant was, I believe, valid in how they thought that this situation was handled.
I'm not in agreement with the summary of the findings at this point.
Yeah, no, I think this one needs to go back to be re-reviewed. I mean, in reading through the full report, not just the summary, there was allegations that the driver also tried to pay people off. So, you know, he was trying to flee the scene. Someone took his keys, they ran, and then tried to like pay people off to give him the keys back. I mean, there's just a whole lot more to this than what was presented. And I think this needs to be investigated further.
Yeah, I agree. I can agree that this was fully investigated by anyone in this situation.
My other question was there any cell phone footage at all from any of the bystanders? Was that part of the record? Do we know?
You know, I didn't review this case. I don't believe that there was. And if there was any by the complainant, I don't believe it was turned over. So I couldn't answer that.
Okay. Sort of leading up to the police arriving on the scene, them crashing, trying to drive off from the first crash and getting out of the car and running, and none of that seemed to have raised any eyebrows. It's just a bit odd to me.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question from everybody? When you review this, do you find more of an issue with the investigation itself, the findings, or both? And just a little bit, so if it's coming back, we can look at it and address concerns appropriately. Is it something where like, well, yeah, it's a complete investigation, but the findings, the findings are not supported by the investigation, or the findings are deficient because the investigation is deficient?
I think
I say,
both.
Yeah, both.
Yeah, the investigation wasn't complete, and then the findings that there was no violation after seeing that no kind of breathalyzer or field sobriety test was conducted after admissions of all the occupants of the vehicle consuming alcohol. Like, that's, the findings just don't match up with the evidence that was presented, on top of the investigation itself being not thorough.
Yeah, and I mean, I know the issue here is the patrolman's investigation fell short, but I'm speaking to the internal investigation you also felt was not enough.
yes.
And I guess one other thing, I mean, not to to pile on, but the accused officer here is only it's identified as accused officer, but the other officer, Officer 2, at some point it said that they were having a discussion about how to deal with the situation, and it was agreed that the parents could they would release the driver to the parents. I feel like Officer 2 should also be an accused officer in this situation, because it seems that there was more than just the one officer that was coming to the conclusion that this was handled appropriately, and it was proper to release this person to his parents' custody and not really investigate anything that the eyewitnesses were complaining of.
We will make note of everything. And just for the record too, whenever something goes back, I will make sure that we get a copy of this discussion, so whoever is reviewing it can clearly hear the concerns that the commission has. So if there's anything else you want to add or discuss, please do, so that we have it.
Let me check my notes.
Is anyone, Nico, Jamal, if you have anything to add, please do. Rick or Blanca, I know that you've put in your input if you have anything additional to add. But yeah, I definitely do not agree with the way any of this was handled from the beginning to the end. As they say, from the rooter to the tutor. I don't agree with any of it.
And my comment would be is that, from my personal perspective, that there was bias there.
Yeah, and I agree. Just like not to really necessarily put myself in it, but my experiences with getting pulled over in Evanston, just for mistakenly thinking I didn't have my seatbelt on, or like getting my car searched for guns. Like the fact that I didn't even do anything, but yet these people just kind of walked scot-free. So yeah, I agree with everything that everyone said. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of fishy in a way.
All right, well, having no further discussion on this, we'll be sending this back to with Sergeant Warnick. Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item. Next on our agenda item, we have department inquiry 20-16. If we can have a motion to begin discussion on department inquiry 20-16.
I
Make a
move.
motion.
Go
I
ahead.
move.
We have Nika and Rick
Go
moving.
ahead, Rick.
Okay.
I seconded this.
Okay, thank you for a second, Rick. All agree, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition, let's begin discussion on department inquiry 20-16. We'll send it over to you, Sergeant Warren.
Thank you. So this complaint came in September, or it occurred in September. It came in a few days later. Essentially, it came initially as a driving complaint. The complainant said that he was on his bicycle. He felt the officer was driving super fast in between stoplights, didn't activate any emergency lights, and went into the 7-Eleven. Further investigation showed that there was a call from a City of Evanston employee to the parking garage. So up in the elevators, if you guys are familiar, on the Sherman garage off of Davis there. And there was some subjects who were homeless who were living on the 11th floor in the foyer. When the officer got there, he didn't advise the complainant in the elevator, or I'm sorry, he didn't advise a citizen and the subjects he was dealing with that they were on body cam, which is state law. He also really just didn't deal with helping them get out of there, see if they had anything they needed. Just essentially was like, are you guys good? I'm out of here. Just get out of here. And at that point, left, and really there was no follow-up whatsoever on it. So essentially, he was given a 1-day suspension for all the rule violations other than the driving. The driving part of it was caught on the body worn camera, or the vehicle. So you can see that he wasn't accelerating too fast. Maybe from the perspective of the complainant, he was when he was driving, with the bicycle. I don't know. I wasn't there, obviously. But he was given a 1-day suspension for the rule violations other than the driving, which is 27.
Okay. My question on this, I don't see it being addressed of the alleged stop at 7-Eleven during that drive.
So he parked, I guess I should have been more clear about that. So where he parked to go in the parking garage, it's at Davis and what is that, Benson? There's the one elevator that goes up across from CTA. So he parked his car there, I would assume in the bike lane, which is right in front of 7-Eleven. So I think to the complainant who was biking by, it looked like he was just going into 7-Eleven and not into the elevators. But he never went into 7-Eleven. He went into the elevators and went up to the 11th floor.
Were his lights, I'm sorry, were his lights activated?
When
he was making this drive, yes.
No, they weren't activated, and the body cam footage doesn't show him driving aggressively. That's the one thing. I mean, the complainant thought he was driving aggressively, but there was no way to determine. I mean, from watching the video, you can see that things aren't passing at crazy speed. So it does look like he's driving a normal speed. So I don't know with that as far as if he was driving, but he wasn't blowing red lights. He was obeying the traffic law as far as everybody who reviewed this could tell.
Okay, anyone else have any discussion on this?
I don't.
This came in as a non-emergency call, correct? Or did it come in as an emergency?
It did come in as a 911 call. It was a city employee who called it in. Since the parking garage is city-owned property, I don't know if the city employee got into it with the subjects trying to get them out of there. It is an issue that we do have in our parking garages and some of our city properties with people who are homeless, sleeping places that keep warm. So I'm not sure what ensued prior to the call, but the city employee did call 911.
I just have a quick question, just like procedurally. So this complaint came in as a complaint about the officers, allegedly speeding during our, between traffic lights, but the resolution of it, sort of brought in the issue of him not fully investigating or not fully following up on the, dealing with the homeless people living in the, staying in the building. So had this call not come in about the speeding issue, would his dealing, how he dealt with the homeless issue, the homeless, dealing with the moving the homeless folks from the building, would that not have even come up in his as a review point? Because it just seemed like that came out of the blue as I was reading this report about the speeding issue, and then all of a sudden they're talking about something completely different from what the complaint was actually relating to.
Right. So we do have a monthly body camera review. So possibly the sergeant could have reviewed his video and seen that. I guess he could have looked at the ticket and seen it was a parking garage. I'm not sure 100% what was on the ticket as far as how he dispositioned it, whether he said that people were there. I don't recall off the top of my head. But basically, when I looked at it, I just wanted to make sure he wasn't racing to go into 7-Eleven to get a cup of coffee. And then when I watched his video, he didn't go into 7-Eleven. He went upstairs. And as I'm watching it, I see him dealing with, what he's dealing with, and these other rule violations happen. So that's where that came from. But unless it was a sergeant down in patrol or, because they do the camera reviews every month, you do a certain amount of camera reviews per officer. So unless the sergeant who's assigned that officer would have pulled that video, I don't know that it would have been caught.
Okay.
Commander, do you have anything?
Yeah, no, I think that, as time goes on, it doesn't happen with every complaint, by far every complaint, but it's not, I think as we go through the months and years of this commission, you will from time to time see complaints where the initial complaint was unfounded. But during that investigation, there is another policy violation that is detected by the supervisor and addressed. Like I said, I wouldn't say that it's definitely not a majority of the complaints, but it does happen from time to time. And I think that's something you'll see as time goes on.
Do we have any other further discussion of DI 20-16, I believe?
No.
No further discussion. Can I have someone move this to HSC?
I move for DI 2016 to go to HSC.
A second.
A second.
All agree, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition, we will move DI 20-16 to HSC. All right, we're gonna continue to move down the agenda to Department Inquiry 20-17. If I can have a motion to begin discussion on DI 20-17.
I move to begin discussion on DI 20-17.
If I can have someone second.
I second.
Thank you, Rick, for seconding. All agree, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition, we'll begin discussion on DI 20-17. We leave this to you, Aaron.
All right, thank you. So this came in September. This was a traffic or a street stop, essentially. A female who was African-American was out. It was about, 1 a.m. She's at her vehicle with her bicycle, and the officer patrolling in the area stops to talk to her, find out what she's doing out there. At that point, she essentially tells him that she doesn't like being stopped because she feels she's being racially profiled. He explains to her that there's been a lot of car burglaries in the area. She offers up her driver's license information to him. He takes it, checks it, and she goes on her way. And essentially, from that point, goes inside. The officer clears. She comes to the station and files or speaks to the sergeant on duty. And at that point, OPS gets a complaint from the friend who was on the phone with the complainant. And then we also got a complaint from the actual complainant who this happened to. So we did have 2 complainants on this one. So once you look through everything, I don't know if you guys want to see the video. We do have the video for this one. That's up to you. I know Shauna had requested it. Nobody else had. So ultimately, it's up to you guys if you want to see it. If you have any questions, I can answer. I know everyone's read through everything, so let me know.
Was anyone interested in reviewing the video? I know Shauna was not able to be here this evening. She was interested in it, but was anyone else that's present this evening interested in seeing the video?
I'm good.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on this complaint? Okay. I reviewed this. I understood her frustration on here, but I also understood it seemed to me as though the officer was being courteous. This is that fine line again. It's like you are like if you're in an area where there are a high reported burglaries, so you feel like you're doing your due diligence and just kind of like checking out people, but then you also have to see it from the other perspective that you're in your neighborhood. Like, what about me makes an officer believe that I am I'm in the commission of a felonious activity, you know? And so, I don't know, this is a sticky one for me. As far as the review of the officer, I can't find anything in particular wrong with it. It didn't seem like he was being disrespectful at the time. She walked away before he can apologize. Only thing I can say is that maybe he leads off with that information. That way he de-escalates in the beginning, as opposed to waiting towards the end once you've done your investigation. Then you want to say, oh, and by the way, I'm sorry. More off come in like, okay, we had a higher report of crime. I don't know. It becomes a very, very sticky situation. In this, I just think like you have to approach this with caution, especially when you are, because you can make people feel as though they are being targeted when they are just home. So that will be my only discussion on this, because I will feel offended as well as the complainant, as well as the complainant's friend. But then it's like, how do you tell? No one goes out with criminal across their head, so they're not easily identifiable. So that's my only discussion on this. If anyone has anything else to say, please feel free to do so at this point.
No, it's interesting because, I mean, by law, everything that we talk about, there's wide discretion by law. And so what it comes down to is a culture of who we are, as law enforcement in our community, making and having discussion. I mean, that is, that's kind of, where we are. So hopefully, our officers are being trained to de-escalate and clearly not utilize every law toolbook that they have and make good, sound decisions in support of our citizens.
Yeah. Again, that's where that community relations come in, with between the community and the police department, so that, there can be more communication and transparency there. But yeah. So other than that, I have no problem with this complaint necessarily, or this inquiry.
I agree. I think it was handled as best it could be. I don't think there was any violation of any rule, any of the rules in this one. But I agree that, kind of leading with the reasoning of, hey, there's been a rash of burglaries and we're just checking things out, may have possibly diffused some of the frustration.
It's pretty hard to break a rule.
Yeah.
I must say.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing that now, aren't we? So, that being said, any further discussion? If no further discussion, if I can have a motion to move this to HSC?
I move that we move DI number 2017 to Human Services.
Second, if I can have a second?
Second.
All right. All agree, say aye.
Aye.
Assuming everyone said aye. Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition, we will move Department Inquiry 20-17 to HSC. I'm sorry, someone was saying something.
All right, so then we need to make a bit of a change, because I approve DL 2017. And so
you
what really
approved
should
it.
be approving, DL 2016. I just made a motion to move 2017, but in actuality, it was DI 2016.
No, we're on 2017.
We're doing 2017 now.
Yeah, that's the one we just discussed.
All right,
Yeah.
so
That's
good.
when we moved in to HSC.
All right,
Okay, so just to make a clean record, can I have a motion to move DI 2017 to HSC?
I moved to that DI 2017 be moved to HSC.
Can I have a second?
I second.
All right, all agree, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition, Department Inquiry 20-17 will be moved to HSC. All right, next on our agenda, we have the approval of the CPRC December reports to Human Services Committee. If I can have a motion to approve the report.
I move for approval of the December 2020 report to HSC.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All agree, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition, it's approved to the CPRC December reports to HSC is approved. Let's move on down our agenda to our first item for discussion is the 2021 Training Commission update. So on this one, are you taking over for this, Paulina?
I'm just sharing my screen, but I believe Commander Glue will do the
Okay.
presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Paulina. Yeah, Paulina's going to be doing sharing the screen, but I'll be doing the talking. So he said this is a training and discussion session. A little bit of background on this. After some of the concerns that were voiced, at our last meeting. Kimberly, myself, and Sergeant Warnick met, and we thought that there would be, especially because, hey, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're pretty much caught up on cases, right? We don't have too much pending.
Yeah, so after today, we have one other CR that is probably going to be March before the commission sees it, and all our DIs are up to date, other than this DI 2013, which will come back. We'll see if we can get it back before February, but otherwise March. So looking into February right now, we have no complaints for February.
So anyway, based on our, thanks, Aaron. Based on our last meeting, the voices, the concerns that were voiced, again, we met and we kind of came up with some topics we thought that would be good to address for those concerns. And I do have up there that it is a discussion session. So as we go through this, if there's topics that come up or you know, feedback, it is a discussion. So why do the goals of the training discussion are we kind of feel that we need to compensate for some deficiencies in training due to COVID-19. There is I believe there's some additional training we wanted this board to go through prior to going kind of live, and COVID-19 was an obstacle to that. So that's part of our mission. Again, as I stated before, addressing concerns that were voiced by commission members, and every commission, every entity kind of evolves. So part of this training is to evolve the commission with regards to its mission. Did not intend for that to rhyme, but it does. So, but tonight is basically going to be a bit of a short, probably shorter, and it's an intro to the plan for conversations and training in the coming months. So in the coming months, these are the kind of the topics that we identified that would probably be good to review. This is not a definitive list. This is tentative. So if things come up, we want to add or subtract or move around things that are complementary, we can do that. But February, our tentative plan is to review body worn cameras and complaint intake. That'll basically entail body worn camera policy, the law, you know, retention, storage, so on and so forth. And then additionally, our complaint intake process and how we want to touch on how body worn cameras change how we kind of intake complaints. Basically, what used to be, you know, 5 years ago, an anonymous complaint, there wasn't a lot we could do with it. Now complaints that are more anonymous are investigated more thoroughly because of body worn cameras. March will be officer bill of rights, due process, and complaint investigation. We think that these topics are relevant because one of the things that came up at the last meeting was these investigations sometimes take a really long time. And I think that that's a fair and objective observation, but we want to give some context to why these things take the time that they do. April, and I apologize, I completely, doing a slide, I completely butchered April. That's not the Police Accountability and Public Relations Act. That should read the Police and Community Relations Improvement Act. That is the act that oversees officer-involved death investigations, officer-involved shootings. We think that making us all familiar with that and the dynamics of that legislation and those investigations would be beneficial for all of us. And then April, then in May, that is our topic there we think is a good one, but I don't want to share it yet because it's pending legal review. And hopefully I'll have some more answers come next month. I will admit we're holding this one back because we think it's good. We have high hopes and we think that you guys will enjoy it, but I don't want to get the hopes up and get it dashed by the legal department. So that's why I'm holding back on that one. We want to revisit the goals of this ordinance and kind of articulate them in our own words. And obviously the first one is transparency. We think that one of the big goals of this ordinance, this commission, is transparency of the police department transparency is a priority in the culture of the community of Evanston. That is clear to everybody, including ourselves, and we think that transparency is a goal. The next one is policy compliance. We need to have a number of policy compliance measures in place to have, to have a robust policy compliance program within our department. This serves as part of policy compliance. It's one of the measures that we have. And I think that the next point I'm going to make also touches on deterrence, which is the fact that you have returned now 2 cases, at least since I've been involved with this commission, is part of that function of policy compliance. Are the officers complying with policy? Is the investigation leading to the right conclusion? And is that being followed up? And the last one is deterrence, and that's related to quality control. I think that I think that those of us directly involved with this commission know that there should be a deterrence to shoddy investigation and police work, and also a good sound quality control. It has good sound quality control with regards to the investigations. And I think the further that we go along, the more that's going to become evident as these investigations are looked at, and it's your feeling that they may be deficient and go back. That's going to send an element of quality control in the process and deter people from, slacking off on what they're supposed to do. I recognize there's going to be times that we bring a thorough, well-reasoned investigation forward, and there may not be agreement or so on and so forth. I hope that would be rare, and more it's going to be, there was a lack of quality control, it's detected, and we're going to address that. The next thing I want to touch on is our numbers for the last 5 years with regards to complaints. What if this commission was around since 2016? What would your years have looked like? How busy would it have been? With regards to crime and complaints and so on and so forth, Evanston is a pretty small statistical sample. It is 75,000 people. There are a significant amount of police contacts, but it is statistically small. So it can get like, as we look at the complaints that you guys would have reviewed for the last 5 years, 17 in 2016, 10 in 2017, 2018 is 17, 2019 would have been 15, and 2020 is 20. Some of those years are quiet, where we'd be reviewing on average less than 1 case a month, some closer to 2. But some years or some periods will be a little bit more busy, and I would say, for lack of a better term, a little more interesting. And some periods will be based on the fact that it's just quiet and uninteresting. And part of that has to do with we're just not a huge statistical sample. So some years will be like, wow, what's going on? Some years might be a little quieter. And this tracks along with some of our crime as well.
I'm sorry. I just had a quick question.
Sure.
So basically you're saying that every complaint that comes through the police department, the city of Evanston, they're right here.
Yeah, these are my quick numbers from reviewing the last couple of years.
But is that like another 5 that we don't really see, or number 2, or?
No, I mean, my research may not be infallible, but going through our records, these are the numbers I came up with. I'd be happy to double check and make sure. But going through our numbers, this is what I came up with.
Yeah, and Commander, if you check those off the spreadsheets, they're accurate.
Okay. But I'll be happy to double check. I mean, I can definitely miss something, and I want it to be, if there is a question, again, of quality control, I want to be able to stand behind it, and I will double check and make sure that the source I got this is up to date. So if it's a 19 and a 12 and a 19 and a 17 and a 22, and my where I looked at the source was wrong or missing stuff, I want to be able to stand behind it. So I'm going to make a note to double check this.
All right. So now here's another question.
Sure.
So these numbers, I mean, they're 75,000 residents. I mean, this is not bad at all. What would you attribute these low numbers, from my perspective, what do you attribute that to?
Would you buy it if I said really good police work?
I'd buy it.
No.
I'd buy it.
I
Possibly.
do. I'm going to take a minute, and I'm not going to say that our department's not error free, and there's not going to be times that we're not going to be looking at some significant mistakes as a group. I'm not going to say that at all, but I definitely think that our department as a whole has a pretty good understanding of what the local community. We should be able to communicate pretty effectively with the community. And I think that if we're communicating well in our contacts, it's going to keep our complaints down. We have seen complaints in the past where people do everything right, but they're not an effective communicator and it brings about a complaint. Sometimes we may screw up, but since we're personable and a good communicator, that may not be a complaint that comes to us. That may be something that is taken care of on the street and everybody comes to an agreement there and it kind of moves on. But I think that these numbers are a reflection of our understanding of the community and the long multi-generational police commitment to engagement, community policing, anti-bias training, racial sensitivity training, which is part of our culture and has been for generations. And
So if someone made a complaint, that complaint comes in the system regardless. It's not complaints that are poo-pooed, if you will.
No, there was a move. There was I would say that probably maybe 20 years ago, if there was a complaint that came in and was handled with a supervisor, and kind of like are you okay? Is it cool? So on and so forth. All right. And then we just kind of moved on. Right now, we do definitely have the mentality, if we get a complaint, it needs to be documented. And if it's a departmental inquiry or a CR, it's got to be investigated. So we're not, it doesn't, I'll be honest, with the demand of transparency that we understand and oversight, the risk of trying to bury or poo-poo a complaint, it's just not worth it. I think that what we're doing, our mistakes, we can, we'll own up to them when they happen. And in general, there's no benefit for anybody. It's not a benefit for us or the community to try to bury complaints or poo-poo them.
Okay, I'm good.
But I will make this commitment. Like I said, we do have different sources where the numbers come from. And I am going to verify this and make sure I can stand behind these numbers. I didn't grab them from a different spot. Something that was incomplete.
Okay.
All right. And then we'll head to our last slide here. So this is just kind of basically our conclusion. I know we touched on a lot of questions already, but again, this is a conversation. So questions and insights and ideas, whatever the commission has to bring forward, we would like to hear them. And then the last part is I have a little homework, for lack of a better term, and that would be to review the city website and the complaint form that's on there, because we're talking about complaint intake next time, the body-worn camera law and policy. And then, what do your acquaintances think may be beneficial for, if you have conversations about your role? What would people that you talk to think would make people more comfortable in the complaint process? And before we go back to questions, insights, and ideas, if people need me to compile where to get this information, the website, complaint form, body-worn cameras law and policy, please let me know. I'll send an email that can be forwarded to everybody, and hopefully it just has some hyperlinks that you can look it up. So with that, I open it up to everybody.
That last point, if you could put all the hyperlinks in an email to send out, that would be helpful.
Very good.
All right. Thank you for that information.
Anybody Anybody got any other, and like I said, this isn't a pop quiz. So if you think of something regarding this topic, just because we're talking about something next time, doesn't mean you can't bring it forward. So if something crosses your mind in 2 weeks, feel free to jot it down and bring it to our attention next meeting.
That's fair. Appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion on that? No? Okay. Thank you, Commander. We can move on to on the agenda. We have a civilian complaint review.
Move that.
Good question, Paulina. If you can let me know.
I'm not, Tashik, do you have any information about this item?
No, I don't.
Okay, I'm sorry, Ms. Shambi, I'm not familiar with the item.
Which item are you looking for?
The civilian complaint review.
Where is that on the?
This is
For
5B.
discussion?
5B.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
There's a report attached, so I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I'm
I don't
wondering
know.
if it's a
Yeah,
leftover.
can we just put it over to the next meeting and then we can talk to Kimberly about that? Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right, so let's move on. We have a executive session, a motion to convene into executive session. Was this something that was brought up in the last meeting? Because I know we don't have a motion to convene for this particular meeting. And I know I wasn't present for the last meeting.
No, I know Shauna had requested video to be reviewed.
Oh, okay.
So I think based on that, Kimberly put it in there. And then she
Okay.
couldn't attend after Kimberly did this. So I think that's why that's there.
Okay, right, and we move forward from that. Okay. All right, so we don't have an executive session to move into. So I think that's it. So if I can have a motion to adjourn.
At
I
7:45.
motion that we adjourn.
All right, can I have a second?
And second.
Second.
Okay, so at 7:44, I have 7:44, sorry.
Right.
If I can have
Thanks.
all to agree for a motion to adjourn, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Having no opposition to the adjournment, it was great seeing you guys again. Happy New Year. Today was not the greatest day, but then again,